POV. We stayed overnight. I knew I had a big biology test the next day, but I had to be here to support Taehyung. And especially Jenny. Her fingers wrapped around mine were one of the warmest, most graceful moments I've experienced in a long time. I just felt an automatic connection to her heart, her soul. Just feeling her epidermis under mine sent electric shocks going through every vein in my body. And even when the lights in her hospital room went out for the night, Jenny still didn't let go of my hand. She didn't want to. I couldn't talk to her because I didn't want her breathing to get any worse, and the doctor recommended that she gives her voice a rest. So I'm actually sitting in Taehyung's chair for the whole night while he sat next to me in mine. He didn't say much, he was too emotionally unstable, and I didn't want him to start crying because then I would, and then Jenny would, and that could lead to problems. In the morning, I woke up to Taehyung gently shaking my shoulders. I glanced confusedly up at him, and he gave me a gentle smile. I could see that his eyes were bloodshot, he didn't get enough sleep. Jungkook POV end. Taehyung, come downstairs with me, there's a cafe down there. He whispered gently, they're going to feed her soon. Quote. Jungkook glanced down at Jenny and realized that their hands were still tied together. Jungkook swallowed, and slowly let go of her hand, and glanced up at her face, at her long, pretty eyelashes. Her eyes were closed. She was sleeping. Taehyung grabbed his hand, and he led him out of the hospital room and down to the cafe. He bought Jungkook some hot chocolate and 2 donuts. Then, he led him to a corner table for 2, and they both sat down, and ate their meals in silence. This wasn't right. It wasn't the same. They weren't like they usually were at other times. This was sad, awkward, in a way, and Jungkook didn't like it. Taehyung couldn't even look at him in the eyes. He didn't look at Jungkook at all. He just stared down at his food, at the table, or glanced around at the other people in the cafe. Jungkook, I'm sorry, he whispered. Jungkook didn't know what to say. What could he say? He didn't know if he did anything wrong, or if this was his fault, or anything. Taehyung looked at him, for the longest time, and Jungkook looked down, obviously feeling guilty. Taehyung, look at me, he said, but Jungkook didn't. He reached over, and grabbed his chin, and made Jungkook look at him. Taehyung, I'm sorry, I'm being a dick right now, I should be talking to you, I shouldn't have even brought you here. Jungkook, I want to be here. Taehyung, but you shouldn't be here. Jungkook pulled away slowly, looking down at someone's Converse, and he heard Taehyung sigh. Taehyung, I love you, Jungkook. Jungkook, I love you too. Taehyung, thank you. Jungkook looked over at him. For being here. Jungkook gave him a reassuring smile, but it didn't last long. Jungkook just turned away, still having a bunch of guilt in his heart as Jungkook looked around the cafe, refusing to look back into Taehyung's eyes. Taehyung, she needs surgery. Jungkook, what? Jungkook frowned as he looked into the hospital window into Jenny's room. Taehyung was standing beside him, peering inside, and Jungkook had just gotten back from the bathroom while the doctors were checking up on Jenny's patched up leg. Taehyung, I think she needs surgery. Taehyung murmured, not looking at him. Jungkook stared at him, but his eyes never left his mother. Jungkook sighed, looking down at his chucks, feeling horrible inside. Taehyung, you can leave if you want. Jungkook looked back over at Taehyung, frowning. His eyes were completely serious as they stared at Jungkook. Jungkook, why would you say that? He asked. Taehyung, you don't look like you wanna fucking be here. Suddenly, his voice was filled with annoyance, almost anger. And if you don't, then leave. Jungkook stared at him for a long time, and Jungkook groaned, shaking his head, and Jungkook turned away and began walking down the hallway, down the stairs, and to the cafe. He slid down in a table, took out his phone, and started scrolling through the homepage. Jungkook POV. I didn't understand why Taehyung always did that. He'd be fine 1 second, but the next, he's just angry with me. Like he's bipolar or something. I didn't know if it was because he was just upset with how his mother was turning out, or if he actually blamed me, or if he was just turning back into his original self. But I wasn't going to leave. I'm not the kind of person that walks out on somebody important, just because of some dumb statement. And I didn't need to worry about leaving because after half an hour of playing Crossy Road, I saw Taehyung's image appear inside the cafe and toward me. I acted like I didn't notice him. Even when he sat in the chair right in front of me, I still didn't look at him. He sighed, and then, he snatched the phone right out of my grasp. I glared at him as he stared back, setting the phone a couple inches from my fingers on the table. Taehyung, I'm sorry, he muttered. I'm mad, I'm upset, but not at you, quote. I tapped my fingers on the table, my eyes watching their movements. I could feel his eyes on me, but I ignored their presence. So he quickly leaned forward and kissed me lustfully, his lips reaching out to grasp more of mine. He pulled away slowly, his eyes deeply looking into mine as he settled back in his chair. Taehyung, listen, I need you right now. His voice was suddenly weak, which caught my attention. Taehyung, I don't know if my mother is going to survive this. The doctor explained that she lost a lot of blood, and her chances of living through her 2 surgeries that she's going through could be slim. And I need you, Jungkook, to be here for me, like I have for you, because I love you more than anything, and you're the only person that can ease the pain through this. I stared silently at him before bending over and kissing him. His hands reached up and cupped my cheeks softly as he deepened the kiss, and I could feel the wanton lust and passion he put in that kiss, and it made my heart hurt. I could feel his emotions spilling out, his broken, his hurt, his pain. It was amazing how he went one day just fine and the next, he's entirely shattered by one event. And after that, Taehyung grabbed my hand, and he led me back up the stairs, where we rejoiced with Jenny back in her hospital room. Jin, where have you been? I was surprised by how loud Jin's voice sounded on the other end of the phone. I remembered the last time I saw him, when I was angry at him, and when he just looked so helpless and apologetic. I tried to understand why Jin asked me the question. Jin, hello. Jungkook, what? Jin, I've been getting calls from the school about your absence. Shit. I guess I never got somebody to call me in sick. Jungkook, oh, I just haven't been feeling well, and I didn't feel like calling the high school. I don't know why I lied. I could have just straight out told him about Taehyung's mother, but I don't think he'd be happy with me skipping school because of a situation like this. Jin, well, you should have told me about it. Jungkook, sound familiar? The other end was silent as I referenced back to when Jin didn't tell me he was leaving. Jungkook, anyway, I think I just had the flu. I haven't thrown up, just severe stomach and headaches, and a high temperature. I think I'll be fine though. Jin, do you need me to come home? Jungkook, I'll be okay. Jin, okay, he sniffed. Well, I miss you, quote. Jungkook, I miss you too. I swallowed. Jin, and just be careful, okay? I don't need you to get worse than what you already are. Jungkook, okay. Jin, I'll talk to you later. Jungkook, bye. I hung up and turned back toward Jenny's hospital room. Her surgery on her leg was soon. She already had her arm procedure, and she went fine through it. She was responsive and all that, and I was planning on getting her little story soon. I was a little uncomfortable talking to Taehyung about it. Suddenly, Taehyung stood up, smiling one last time at his mother before turning toward me and approaching me, coming out into the hallway where I was standing. Taehyung, I'm going to go get something to eat. Wanna come with me? Jungkook, no thanks, I'm not hungry. Taehyung stared at me for a couple moments, and I looked down at the tattoos on his arm. He sighed, and cupped my face in his hands and kissed me slowly and gently, before pulling away, running a hand from the top to the bottom of my head, and then walking past me and heading downstairs. I looked back at Jenny auntie, and found her staring at me through the window. I haven't really had much interaction with her ever since the first night. When she held my hand, I slowly walked into the room, and sat myself in the chair Taehyung was using. Jungkook, hi, I said quietly, and she gave me a gentle smile. Jenny, hi. Jungkook, how is your arm feeling? Jenny, it's good, it's good. She moved her head slowly and looked down at her patched up arm. She stared at it for a while, and then sighed, and turned back toward me. Jenny, and how are you? Jungkook, I could be better. Jenny, and why is that? Why is that? I looked down at my shaking fingers. Why were they shaking? Jungkook, I guess with just yours and Taehyung's condition, and my relationship with my brother I suppose isn't the greatest. Jin, oh, we always have fights with our siblings. Jenny's gentle smile was still plastered on her face. And don't worry about me, or Taehyung. I'll do fine, quote. Jungkook, but this is a big one coming up. I said softly. I don't mean to scare you, but the doctor said this can cause a lot of problems to you and your body. Jenny, just this leg surgery, huh? Jungkook, yep. Jenny, I'll be fine. Jenny said. I'm a strong woman, I've gone through one surgery, I'll slip through the other just fine. She turned toward me. Jenny, my son is really in love with you. Jungkook, oh, is that so? I chuckled softly. Jenny, oh yes, all he does is talk about you. I smiled, more to myself. A warm feeling crossed my heart. Jenny, he just talks and talks and talks, and whenever he goes into something else, it always leads back to you. He's told me everything you've gone through. Jungkook, everything? I asked. Jenny, well, maybe not everything. She chuckled, and I smiled. Jenny, but mostly everything, I think. And it's weird because with previous boyfriends, he always wanted to keep it to himself. Like they really weren't that important for me to learn about. But with you, it's a whole different story. He wants me to know everything, how amazing you are, how much he loves you, how he would do anything for you. I was never fond of Taehyung falling in love with somebody because I always thought they would smash him, but I'm actually beginning to like this. I laughed out loud, a true laugh. And Jenny went on about Taehyung and I even got to learn some of the things I was wishing to learn about. Since Taehyung was a baby, his abusive father, who had beat Jenny and Taehyung's older sister, Katrina, had been sent to jail for robberies and abusive behavior. Katrina, who was now 27, lives somewhere in Oklahoma with her husband and two 4-year-old twin sons. A couple times, after being released, his father, Robert, has tried getting back together with Jenny and Taehyung, but Taehyung always pushes him out. From the way Jenny was explaining it, I could tell Taehyung hated Robert more than anything. And to get away from the mess, Taehyung moved out at 17, to where he is now, while Jenny lives maybe 10 minutes away, somewhere in town. I'm sure she didn't know anything about Taehyung's bad boy behavior, or why he never even mentioned Jenny or his sister Katrina or Robert or any of his past. Eventually, my hand was back in Jenny's, and we were both silently sitting there, listening to the hospital sounds around us. Taehyung came back in, with a BLT and a Diet Coke, and he shared most of his food with me. It wasn't rude toward Jenny, though, because the doctors had just fed her, and she wasn't in a food mood anyway. And I wasn't sure whether Taehyung was okay with Jenny telling me everything he never wanted to tell me, so I just stayed quiet and joined in occasionally on their conversations. The next day, Taehyung drove me back home. Jenny's leg procedure was scheduled in a couple days, and during that time, Taehyung wanted me back home, to get some of that stress out of my mind, to get back in school. Jungkook POV end. Jungkook, you should do the same, Jungkook muttered softly on the car ride back to his house. Taehyung looked over at him, and Jungkook looked back, suddenly becoming uneasy. Taehyung, I have to be there for her. Jungkook, but you need a break, you know you do. He said. Jungkook, you look tired, you're exhausted. And frustrated, and you need better sleep. And I know your mom doesn't like to see you like this. Taehyung, Jungkook, just please, stop. Jungkook turned away, sighing, not wanting to start an argument. Taehyung, I want to be there for her, I don't care how tired I am. She's my damn mother, she was always there. Jungkook, okay, I was just trying to help. He snapped, and an unsettling silence filled the darkness of the car. Taehyung, God, I just tried to fucking help, but you just snapped, just like that, and make me feel like shit. So, I'm sorry for trying to make you feel better. I kept my eyes staring out the window, not wanting to look at him. I knew he was watching me, but I ignored it. We eventually pulled into my driveway, and I quickly opened my door. Jungkook, thanks for the ride, Taehyung. He growled. Taehyung, Jungkook, wait. He grabbed onto his wrist, and Jungkook looked over at him. I'm sorry. Jungkook, yeah, so am I, have a good night. Taehyung, Jungkook, please, just listen to me. Jungkook glared at him, and he stared back. He sighed, and unbuckled his seatbelt, and reached over Jungkook and shut his door. Taehyung, I love you. I'm sorry, okay, I just feel like I need to be there for her. Jungkook, okay, that's fine, bye. Jungkook just wanted to get out of there. He was almost careless after everything, and Jungkook didn't want him to apologize. Jungkook just wanted to be in his bed, and fall asleep, and wake up weeks later, after this was all over. Taehyung, Jungkook, I'll stay. Jungkook stared at him for a long time. I just don't want you to be upset with me. Quote. Jungkook, no Taehyung, it's fine, just go back to the hospital, you're right, you should go there. Taehyung, Jungkook. His eyes stared seriously into Jungkook. He got out of the car, and walked to Jungkook's side and opened his door and grabbed him and picked him up in bridal style. Taehyung, I'm staying with you tonight. Warning, this contains sexual activity. Thank you. Jungkook POV. I felt like I was flying, in a securing way, as Taehyung brought me up to my bedroom. He laid me down softly on my bed, and turned the lights off. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, and I didn't know where he was or what he was doing. I could hear a sound, like he was pulling something off. But I didn't have to wait for long, because I felt his soft lips smash onto mine, and when I put my hands on his broad shoulders, I felt his warm skin beneath my fingertips. He crawled over me, his lips eagerly grabbing onto mine again and again, his hands and arms on either side of my small body, supporting his off mine. I gripped his bare back with one hand, my other hand trailing over his abs, his chest and his neck. My body began trembling as he moaned quietly, and then his fingers went to the bottoms of my shirt and started tugging at it. I pulled my lips away from his for a brief moment, to try and look down so I could pull my shirt off. But he, being eager to love me, placed his lips back to mine, one of his hands lifting up and resting itself on the back of my head so he could pull my face closer. Jungkook, Taehyung, stop. I mumbled, pulling away again. He waited, his eyes lustfully staring and gazing at my face as I looked down and pulled my shirt off. And as I flung it across my bedroom, he launched back at my lips, his hands now resting and gripping my thighs tightly, pushing my back on the pillows. Taehyung, I love you. He moaned, pulling away for a second to say those 3 words. He stared, kissing me again, and I smiled, a warm feeling crossing my heart. Once again, he pulled away. Jungkook, I love you so much. Then, he started pulling my skinny jeans off. I was kind of caught up in the moment, and ignored it, reaching out to my bad boy and feeling his muscular stomach. He tossed my jeans over to the side, and then he suddenly grabbed my hands and rested them on the zipper to his jeans, and bent over and mumbled in my ear. Taehyung, take 'em off, princess. A whole wave of mixed feelings and emotions and thoughts crossed my mind. I knew what he wanted. He wanted it badly. I had chickened out of something like this before between us, and he felt guilty about it. How would he feel if I pulled away now? I thought about what Jin would think. I thought about what my parents would think. What Kim Jenny would think. I thought about what I would think. I looked up into Taehyung's dark yet warm eyes, as they lustfully yet lovingly stared back into mine. He was breathing heavily, yet slowly and calmly, and he leaned in a little and rested his forehead on mine. I loved Taehyung. That was all that mattered. And since I loved Taehyung, I gave him permission to do this. I wanted to do this, just as much as he did. So I did it. I reached over silently, and began unzipping and pulling down his jeans. I heard him swallow a little, and he kissed me, to give me a reassuring feeling, for my body was still trembling. And once his jeans were off, he pulled my undergarments off. He lay on top of me, his hands resting on my lower back, my hands and fingertips gripping his bare back as I felt this surge of pain enter my body. I groaned, wincing, and Taehyung buried his mouth in my neck and kissed my skin multiple times, muttering, "Taehyung, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And eventually, the pain was replaced with pleasure. I never knew I could trust somebody like that. I had never thought that at the age of 16, I'd have my first time. Yes, I was a virgin. And I knew Taehyung was not. And yet, I trusted him so well that I knew he was the right one to take mine away. During this time, my mind was racing. How was I going to feel after this, and how was he going to feel? Would something in our relationship change after this? And would I ever come to tell Jin, or anybody, in this matter, about this? I felt Taehyung's emotions pour from his body, his touch, his kisses, into mine. I knew at that moment that he was thinking so hard, thinking almost too much, worried about so much things and yet pleasured and happy. He felt good at that moment, with me safely secure in his arms. At one point, he put his lips to the side of my face, and moaned. "Taehyung, you're quiet, baby, make a sound, do something. I need to hear you." I closed my eyes, biting the inside of my bottom lip, and then, I let out a loud, relieving moan. His pace quickened, and I began to feel better about myself. All I could hear was our moans, our breath, the bed creaking slightly under us. But Taehyung kept going, pouring all his feelings and heart to me, and I felt closer than I had ever been with him. He gave one last thrust, and then he moaned loudly, his body shaking over mine as he sighed heavily, his whole body going limp, and he lay down completely on me, his chin right over my head as his face was laying on the top of my pillow, and he closed his eyes, trying to catch his breath. I was doing the same, breathing heavily, my eyes closed. I wrapped my arms tightly around his neck, and kissed the top of his chest, swallowing deeply. I didn't know what to do now, what to feel. But I did know one thing I really wanted to say. "Jungkook, I love you, Kim Taehyung." When I woke up the next morning, realizing I was still in his arms, my whole body relaxed, and I took a big sigh. I closed my eyelids again, and then felt his hand continuously stroking the back of my head. My eyes reopened, and I looked up at him, and realized he was staring at me. He smiled tiredly, closing his eyes, and butterflies filled my stomach. I have been with him for so long, and yet, I still got butterflies, even when he just looked at me. He gripped my body tighter, moaning softly, and I felt his lips warmly brush the skin on my forehead. "Taehyung, you mean the world to me, princess," he whispered. I closed my eyes, enjoying the warmth of his embrace, and smiled. "Taehyung, and I'm never letting you go." "Jungkook, good," I replied softly, staring out from behind his tan, muscular back, and to the curtains, which shined in some bright sunlight. "Jungkook, what day is it today?" "Taehyung, Thursday, or something," I chuckled, pulling away from him, and climbing out of bed. "Taehyung, where you are going?" "Jungkook, I'm gonna take a shower," I mumbled, walking into my closet and retrieving a t-shirt, leggings, and fuzzy socks. "Taehyung, mind if I join?" I knew he was grinning wildly, and I smiled and rolled my eyes, stepping out with my clothes in my hand, and looking over at him. Surely, I was right. "Jungkook, yeah, okay," I said sarcastically, and he silently took the blankets off his body and stood up and started walking over to grab his clothes from the ground. I watched him in awe as he gathered them up, and stood in front of me, still grinning. "Taehyung, okay, let's go," he said simply. "Jungkook, number," I said, smiling as I shook my head slowly. He chuckled and threw his clothes on the bed. "Taehyung, whatever, I don't know why it matters now," he said, sitting on the bed and looking over at me lustfully. "Taehyung, I mean, we're gonna do it in the future." "Jungkook, oh, really?" I raised my eyebrows at him, and his smile increased, and he nodded. I laughed, and I walked into the bathroom and shut the door behind me, and took a shower. When I stepped out, I checked the time, and realized it was actually only 7 a.m. Once I was dressed, I walked into my bedroom, and saw Taehyung laying on his stomach on the bed, scrolling through something on my phone. I frowned. "Jungkook, what are you doing?" I asked, and he turned toward me. "Taehyung, I was looking through your messages with Jimin," he answered simply, and I froze. "From what?" I recalled. We were talking about the first time I had seen Taehyung's. "Yeah." "Jungkook, why?" He smiled, and I closed my eyes and covered my face with my hand, and then he laughed and walked over and grabbed my forearms and took my hand from my face and planted a loving kiss on my lips. "Taehyung, I know you liked it the first time. You saw it. He chuckled quietly, his lips still inches from mine, and I smiled and rolled my eyes, and pulled away. Taehyung, I think you should go back to school today. Jungkook, why? I asked as I entered the hallway and made my way downstairs to the kitchen. He followed. Taehyung, I don't want you missing out on important shit just because you're staying at the hospital with my mom. Taehyung leaned on the counter and watched me as I took out some Pop-Tarts from the cabinet. Jungkook, I'll be fine. Taehyung, I think you should go. I looked over at him, and groaned, and he smiled a little, and walked over, and wrapped his arms around my back and bent around my head and rested his chin on my shoulder as I filled the toaster with the Pop-Tarts. Taehyung, I love you, baby boy. Jungkook, I love you too. I mumbled, not in the mood for school. Taehyung, seriously though princess, you need to go. Jungkook, Finny. I groaned. Answer, I went. Jungkook POV end. When he first stepped in the school doors, he realized just how long it seemed that he hadn't been there. He was almost gone the full week, and coming in and seeing all my friends greeting him and asking if he was okay was just weird. And once Jimin saw him heading toward his locker, he squealed happily, and ran over, grabbing onto his wrist and squeezing it hard. Jimin, I didn't know you'd come back. He exclaimed happily, and I gave him a weak smile. Jungkook, I didn't really choose to, Taehyung made me. He said, and Jimin frowned but nodded. Jungkook, by the way, aren't you suspended from that little dispute with Jillian? Jimin, nah, they wouldn't let me come to school for the first 2 days this week. Jimin answered, leaning on the locker next to Jungkook. Jimin, but now I'm back, and I actually haven't really seen Jillian much lately. Jungkook, I hope she transferred to another school. He said as he shut his locker, and Jimin chuckled, and walked alongside him to their first class. He had completely forgotten about Yoonwoo. So when they walked into class, and he was the first person Jungkook saw, Jungkook was suddenly shocked and confused. Yoonwoo was sitting in his desk, just minding his own business, but Jungkook could just feel the hatred for him growing in his body. Then, Yoonwoo looked over at Jungkook, and Jungkook turned away, and sat in the back with Jimin. Taehyung was gonna pick him up from school. Jungkook's locker was close to the front doors, and he peered out there as he was putting his notebooks away and saw his truck waiting there by the loop. Jungkook smiled to himself, and then turned back toward his locker, when suddenly, someone tapped on the locker next to him. He turned over and frowned when he saw Yoonwoo standing there. He didn't want this shit to start all over again with him. Yoonwoo, you're back, he said softly, and Jungkook rolled his eyes and nodded. Obviously. Yoonwoo, how are you? Jungkook, I'm fine, thanks. Jungkook shut his locker, turned away, and began walking toward the doors. But Yoonwoo grabbed his elbow from behind him and made him turn around to face him. Yoonwoo, I don't want to have a relationship like this anymore. He muttered, and Jungkook raised his eyebrows at him. Yoonwoo, I hate the fact that you still dislike me. I've apologized a lot, and he looked around, out at Taehyung's car. Yoonwoo, I don't want to be enemies with him anymore either. Jungkook, okay, he said, still confused. Yoonwoo, can you tell him what I said? Jungkook looked him up and down, and then back at his eyes, and realized they were pleading. Jungkook, fine, I muttered, and the corners of his lips curved into a warm smile. Yoonwoo, thanks. Jungkook turned away, and continued to walk out the doors, to Taehyung's car. Taehyung, is that seriously what he said? Jungkook nodded silently, peering out the car window. It was silent for a while. They were going back to the hospital to visit Jenny before she had her second surgery. Suddenly, Jungkook felt Taehyung's fingers grasp his hand. Yoonwoo, I don't want you going near him, princess. Jungkook, why not? He frowned. Taehyung, he's done so many things to you, that you should never forgive him for. Taehyung mumbled, looking softly over at Jungkook, yet with a stern expression. Taehyung, and I don't want my little boy to get hurt. Jungkook, I won't, I promise. He said quietly, I'll make sure to watch over him carefully. Plus, I have Jimin that can help me. Taehyung, please don't. Jungkook sighed, I really don't want you near him. Quote. Jungkook, it's okay Taehyung, I'll be fine. He muttered, and Taehyung sighed, and ran his fingers through Jungkook's hair. Jungkook, if he does anything to me, I promise, I'll tell you right away, okay? Taehyung, okay, he whispered, swallowing hard. The hospital loomed into view, and they both got out and began heading inside. Jenny, how are you doing, Jungkook? He smiled as he peered down at their interlocked fingers, and then he looked up at Jenny. Jungkook, I'm doing great, he said. Surprisingly, he was quite satisfied with his life at the moment. Taehyung and he were doing okay, Jimin was okay, he hadn't seen Jillian, and Yoonwoo actually wanted to become friends with Taehyung and him. Jenny, where did Taehyung go? She looked around confusedly, and it looked funny, so Jungkook laughed at her. Jungkook, he went down to the cafe to get us some hot chocolate. Jungkook smiled warmly at her, and she sighed. Jenny, hot chocolate, she repeated, smiling yet rolling her eyes. Jenny, when Taehyung was little, hot chocolate was the only thing that made him sane. He'd be so tired after such a long day at school, or playing basketball, and whenever I came downstairs to greet him, he would already be laying on the couch, with a huge mug of hot chocolate and marshmallows in his lap. Jungkook smiled even wider. He began to really want to know how Taehyung was as a kid. Jungkook, was he a good kid? Jungkook asked quietly, and Jenny looked at him directly. Jenny, at times, she answered, and Jungkook chuckled. Jenny, from 3 to 11, he was actually a very good, sweet boy. He had a lot of friends, I guess what you kids would declare as popular now, but he was never cocky or anything. And then once he became a teenager, he just turned into this cold person. Jungkook understand where she got the last part from, and Jungkook was really glad to say that he helped him change who he was. Jungkook, but he's different now, Jungkook whispered, and Jenny smiled and nodded. Jenny, he sure is, Jungkook. She squeezed his hand tighter, and you made him the way he is now, and I really appreciate you for that. Jungkook chuckled, and looked down at his thumbs, and then, Taehyung entered inside, with 2 mugs of hot chocolate and marshmallows. Jenny couldn't have some before her procedure, and Jungkook felt a little bad about eating and drinking in front of her, but she told him she was completely fine with it. Taehyung pulled a chair up beside Jungkook and bent over and kissed his temple as he handed him the mug, and Jungkook sipped at it, happy to know that it wasn't too hot to burn his lip. Taehyung, how are you, Mom? Taehyung asked gently, reaching over and rubbing up and down her arm, his eyes peering at their locked hands. Jenny, I'm fine, she said softly. I'm a little nervous, but I know I'll do okay. Jungkook, you're really strong, he mumbled, refusing to look at her, and she laughed lightly, putting a warm feeling in his heart. Jenny, well thank you, she said, still smiling. Jenny, I know I can beat this, but it's nice to know somebody will be there with me. Through it all, Jungkook was glad. He really hoped she knew that she meant a lot to him and that he most definitely would be there for her. She yawned. Jenny, I think I need some sleep. Taehyung, you probably do before your surgery. Taehyung stood up, grabbing Jungkook's hand with his free one and pulling him up with him. Taehyung, we'll let you go so you can be fully ready for tomorrow. Jenny, okay. Taehyung bent down and hugged her tightly, and kissed her forehead, and Jungkook hugged her, too. It was around 9, they had been in the hospital for a couple hours. Taehyung, love you, Mom, Taehyung said as he held Jungkook's hand tightly and began leaving the hospital room. Jenny, I love you too. Jenny gave Jungkook one last smile, and he smiled back, mouthing to her, love you. Quote. Jungkook POV. Something overcame me that night, as I lay on Taehyung's sleeping body in his bed. What if Jenny just died during her surgery? What would Taehyung do? What would I do? Taehyung would be completely shattered, and might even go into a depression. I clung onto him even tighter than before, and he moaned in his sleep, turning over so we were on our sides, holding me tighter. And just the thought of Jenny on her deathbed put tears in my eyes. And one tear landed on Taehyung's shoulder, which somehow alarmed him, and he woke up, rubbing his face, and he stared at me for a couple seconds before realizing I was crying. Why was I fucking crying? Jungkook POV end. Taehyung, baby. He grabbed Jungkook's wrist, and rubbed his skin as he bent in and kissed his lips softly, his other hand wrapping around Jungkook's lower back and pulling him so close that Jungkook's body rubbed against his bare, muscular chest. Taehyung, Jungkook, talk to me. Jungkook, what if your mom dies? Jungkook whispered, and Taehyung sighed, and kissed him so much times, Jungkook thought there wouldn't be any more kisses he could give him. Taehyung, she's going to be okay, princess. He whispered to him, I promise. Quote. It's done. She made it, thank God. They all told them she had a rare chance of surviving both surgeries, because both were important and if not done right, could end up very bad for Kim Jenny. But she was strong, like she said the day before her big procedure. And Jungkook was really glad to say that she was most definitely right. Just hours after, Taehyung and he drove over to the hospital. Jenny was of course really drowsy, but she was able to speak to them, at least small talk. Taehyung, how do you feel, Mom? Taehyung asked, looking down at her, his eyes filled with warmness. He was grasping her hand tightly, rubbing the skin above her thumb, while Jungkook sat on her other side, holding her other hand, smiling down at her, too. Jenny, I could be better. Jenny grimaced, looking down at her leg. Jenny, ugh, I feel like they amputated my leg. Jungkook chuckled, and Taehyung looked over at him, his eyes sparkling with love at Jungkook's face. He looked back down at his mother, and bent in, and kissed her forehead. Jungkook, you'll be stronger than before now. Jungkook said quietly, and Jenny looked over at him, and a true, genuine smile appeared on her face. Jenny, yes. She closed her eyes in delight. I can't wait to actually be able to communicate with you, in a more mannerly way. Jungkook, I can't, either. Taehyung smiled wider down at her, not looking at Jungkook. Taehyung, and I can't wait for you to fall in love with him even more, just like I did. Jimin, Jungkook. Jungkook smiled, shaking his head as he heard Jimin's voice sprinting toward the back of him, and then, he jumped beside Jungkook, wrapping his arm around Jungkook's shoulder. Jungkook thought Jimin was high, and Jungkook frowned at him. Jungkook, yes? He asked. Jimin, Jillian. Jillian, why was he smiling after saying her name? Jungkook thought. Jungkook, what about her? He asked, raising his eyebrows a little as he watched Jimin calm down his breath. Jimin, she's gone, man. Jimin said, and Jungkook stopped dead in his tracks. Jimin, her parents were sick of her being a bitch to everyone and causing trouble in the school. Jungkook, so they killed her? He asked. Jimin, number. Jimin laughed. Jimin, they made her transfer schools, your dream come true. Jungkook froze, squinting his eyes suspiciously at him, as he smiled at Jungkook, all wide-eyed. Jungkook, shut the fuck up. Jimin, no, I'm not even joking, dude. Her best friend was crying in homeroom, blubbering about how Jillian left her. It was hilarious, I was peeing myself. Jungkook smiled, and rolled his eyes. Jimin, no seriously, I had to change my underwear. Jungkook chuckled softly, continuing down the hallway to his locker, Jimin still standing beside him. Jungkook felt him staring at him, and Jungkook turned to look at him, and realized he was frowning at him in shock. Jungkook, yes. Jimin, why are you not crying and screaming with joy? He asked, astonished. Jungkook smiled. Jungkook, I'm too glad and relieved to jump around. Jungkook mumbled. Jungkook did his locker combination. And it's not like I'll throw a party, I'm not that mean. Jimin, oh, was all Jimin said, and Jungkook smirked, and looked over at him. Jungkook, so, wanna come to my house, and I'll steal some of Jin's drinks and we can party it up. Jimin laughed. Just kidding. Oh yeah, I forgot about Jin, too. Quote. Jimin, when is he coming back? Jungkook, tomorrow sometime. Jimin, okay. Jimin nodded. I kind of miss the douchebag. Jungkook, me too. Jungkook replied honestly, zipping up his bag, filled with his homework for the weekend. Jungkook did, actually. He didn't want to fight with him anymore. Everything was finally falling into place, and he didn't want to still be in a cold mood with him. The final bell rang, and Jimin hugged him goodbye and ran out the doors to his mom's car. Jungkook took his time walking out through the front doors and down the steps and waited by a bench for Taehyung's car. Meanwhile, as he waited, somebody sat next to him, and Jungkook looked, and was surprised to see Yoonwoo there. Jungkook, hi, he sort of asked quietly, and Yoonwoo smiled warmly. Yoonwoo, hey, he said softly, I heard Taehyung's mom made it. Jungkook frowned, how do you exactly know about this info? Quote. Yoonwoo, oh, Jimin was talking to me about it. Jungkook squinted his eyes at him. Why was he tell him that shit? Yeah, you are probably wondering why, he said, and Jungkook nodded, which made him chuckle a little. I guess he already trusts me or something. I just asked how you were doing, and he plainly told me. Jungkook, oh, that was all he managed to say. Yoonwoo, oh, yeah, so are we like, cool, now? Jungkook raised his eyebrows at him, kind of wondering why he was still talking to him. Did you tell Taehyung about it? Quote. Taehyung, tell me what? They both kind of jumped, and Jungkook looked over at Taehyung, who was slowly approaching him, giving Yoonwoo a glare. Jungkook quickly stood up, not ready for a blown-out fight, and Jungkook walked quickly over to him and put his hands on his chest. Jungkook, nothing. Yoonwoo, no, actually, it's something. Yoonwoo stood up, and slowly walked towards them, but Taehyung wrapped a protective arm around Jungkook's back and pulled him closer, still glaring at him. Yoonwoo, don't worry, I won't do anything. I just needed to let you know that I'm sorry for everything. Taehyung, I don't fucking listen to little boys. Taehyung growled, and Jungkook groaned, looking at him. Taehyung looked down at him. Jungkook, stop, he whispered, and Taehyung sighed, rolling his eyes, looking away. Please, quote. Taehyung, what do you fucking want now? Taehyung looked over at Yoonwoo again, much softer than before. Yoonwoo, I just said, I wanted to apologize. Taehyung looked down at Jungkook slowly, and Jungkook raised his eyebrows at him. He looked back at Yoonwoo, I'm sorry for everything I've done to you and Jungkook. Quote. Taehyung, is Jillian around? Taehyung bent in and whispered to Jungkook, and Jungkook smiled at him. Jungkook, she transferred. Jungkook whispered back, and a big smile appeared on his face, and he bent down and kissed the tip of Jungkook's nose. Then, he looked up at Yoonwoo. Taehyung, it's gonna take a long time for me to forgive you. Taehyung said firmly, grabbing Jungkook's hand tightly and beginning to walk toward his truck. But I guess it's okay for now. Yoonwoo smiled at him, and then at Jungkook, and Jungkook gave him a small smile back, and turned away and got in the passenger seat of Taehyung's truck. He got into, and shut the doors, and started it up. Taehyung, I love you, Jungkook, he said, bending over and kissing him passionately, and Jungkook smiled. Jungkook, I love you too, Taehyung. Jungkook, the door. He shouted from the kitchen in his house, and he heard Taehyung jump off the couch from the living room and scurry over to answer it. Jungkook listened as he opened the door. Jin, whoa. Jin said loudly, and Jungkook stopped flipping the pancakes, and then laughed. Jungkook turned off the pancake maker, and scurried over to the front door, and saw his boyfriend helping his brother grab a suitcase of his. Jin looked over at Jungkook, and smiled, and Jungkook smiled back. Jin, hey, brother. Jungkook, hey, Hyungi. He said he was kind of smirking, because I'm sure the reason Jin made his little reaction was because Taehyung wasn't wearing a shirt, and because he answered a door. Jin eyed Taehyung and then Jungkook, and Jungkook smiled and shook his head. After Jin unpacked, they caught up with him, and Jungkook soon forgot all about their little dispute before he left that one night. It didn't really matter to him anymore, anyway. And he was fine with me laying in Taehyung's lap on the couch the whole time. In fact, he let Taehyung spend the night. So, there they lay, in Jungkook's bed, Taehyung holding him tightly, kissing his face all over, his wet kisses filled with love and passion for Jungkook. Jungkook laid there next to him, smiling, enjoying his warm embrace. Taehyung, I love you. He mumbled softly between his kisses. I love you, I love you, I love you. You mean the world to me. God, I fucking love you. Quote. Jungkook rested the side of his head on his chest, closing his eyes. Jungkook, I love you too. Jungkook mumbled. And he really meant it. Yeah, he was only a teenage boy. Maybe there are things more important out there than some bad boy who's freakishly in love with him. Maybe Jungkook was too young to say things like, I love you. Quote. But he knew damn well what it felt like. It felt like being with Kim Taehyung. The bad boy. But maybe he wasn't bad after all. Maybe people just didn't ever get the chance to know him, like Jungkook did. Maybe he didn't open himself up to others, like he did to Jungkook. And that was more than just a special feeling. It was definitely more than just a special feeling. The end.